There is a kind of falling apart that only happens to people God is about to use. Not a random unraveling, a specific, purposeful, sometimes painful dismantling. The kind the Bible does not call punishment. It calls it preparation. If you are in that place right now, if your life feels less like a path and more like a ruin, stay with me, because what I am about to share may be the most important reframe you have encountered in a long time. We have been taught, most of us, that God's favor looks like smooth roads, that His presence feels like clarity, that when you are walking in His will, the pieces fall into place. And there is truth in that, but it is not the whole picture, because there is another category entirely. A category the Bible speaks of again and again, where men and women of God found themselves in the dark, in the desert, in the prison, in the wilderness, and discovered that the darkness was not the absence of God. It was the closest he had ever been. Joseph did not look like a man on God's path when he was sitting at the bottom of a pit. Moses did not appear to be a deliverer when he was tending sheep in the middle of nowhere for 40 years. Paul did not seem like the greatest apostle in history when he was staring at a prison wall. What if the season that feels the most like failure is the season God has been the most intentional about? What if the silence, the loss, the closed doors are not signs that He has forgotten you? What if they are signs that He is closer to you than He has ever been? Today, we are going to look at 8 hidden signs that you are truly walking on God's path, even when it feels wrong, even when it hurts, even when nothing around you looks like a blessing. These are the signs most people miss, not because they are invisible, but because we have been taught to look for the wrong things. If you have ever whispered, "Lord, am I even on the right road?" this message is for you. 1. You feel stripped of everything familiar. There are seasons where everything you built your life around begins to shift. The job you counted on, the relationship you planned your future around, the city you called home, the version of yourself you introduced to people at dinner parties. One by one, quietly or suddenly, they are gone. And you are standing in a space that used to be full, and now it echoes. The world says that comfort is a sign of blessing, that stability is evidence of God's favor, that if you are losing things, you must have done something wrong, or stepped out of His will, or missed a turn somewhere. And so when the stripping comes, the first instinct is panic. The second is shame. But the Bible is clear in Romans 8:28. And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to His purpose. Notice what that verse does not say. It does not say all things feel good. It does not say all things look good. It says all things work together for good. There is a process implied in that word, together. A weaving, something assembled from pieces that individually look like nothing at all. Paul wrote those words to a church under pressure, to people who had lost houses, reputations, safety, not because they had walked away from God, but because they had walked closer to Him. And His word to them was not, "Hold on, it'll get easier." His word was, "Everything you are losing is being used." Brother, sister, hear me on this. The stripping is not punishment, it is preparation. There are things God cannot build in you while the old structure is still standing. The noise of the familiar drowns out the sound of what He is trying to say. The comfort of the known keeps you from reaching for what He is offering. Think of a woman who spent years building a career that felt right until it didn't. Not because she failed, but because she succeeded at the wrong thing. And when the doors began to close, she called it a crisis. But looking back, she would tell you it was the most merciful thing God ever did. He took what she was clinging to so she could reach for what He was holding out. When you feel stripped, the enemy whispers that you are losing, but God is doing something far more precise. He's not taking your foundation. He is replacing it with one that cannot be shaken. 2. The people who once surrounded you begin to fall away. This one is quiet. It does not announce itself. There is no argument, no dramatic ending, no confrontation you can point to. The people who used to fill your weekends simply stop calling. The group chat goes silent. The friendships that once felt effortless now feel like work. And one day, you realize you are the only one still trying. And the loneliness that moves in is the kind that does not make noise. It simply takes up space. Today, culture has a name for this. It calls it a failure of personality, a social deficit. It tells you that if people are leaving, something must be wrong with you. You are too intense, too serious, too different. And so, the isolation that God has designed as a gift gets misread as a wound. Look at what Jesus said to his disciples in John 15:19. If you were of the world would love you as its own. But because you are not of the world, but I chose you out of the world, therefore the world hates you. Read that carefully. Jesus is not describing an accident, he is describing a design. The separation is not incidental, it is intentional. When you are chosen out of the world notices before you do. And it begins to create distance, not because you have failed, but because you have changed, because the direction of your life no longer runs parallel to theirs. Believer, pay attention to this. Not everyone who drifts away from you is a loss. Some of them are an answer to a prayer you prayed months ago. Lord, surround me with people who are going where you are taking me. And God, who takes that prayer seriously, begins to quietly clear the ground. There is a particular kind of grief in this, and I do not want to skip past it, because these are people you loved, friendships you invested years into, and when they go, it hurts. It is allowed to hurt. David wrote laments about this. Jesus wept over Jerusalem, over people who were walking away from what was good for them. Grief and God's will are not opposites. But here is what you must not do. Do not chase what God is releasing. Do not spend your energy reconstructing relationships that He is lovingly dismantling. There are connections designed for who you were, and there are connections being prepared for who you are becoming. They cannot occupy the same space. If He is removing them, He is making room. And what He is making room for is worth the ache of the empty space. 3. Your prayers feel like they are hitting the ceiling. You kneel, you pray, you wait. You pray again. Same words, same silence. And after weeks of this, sometimes months, a question begins to form that you are almost afraid to say out loud. Is anyone actually listening? This one cuts deep, because prayer is supposed to be the lifeline. It is where you go when everything else has failed. And when the lifeline feels like it is disconnected, the fear that moves in is not just loneliness. It is something closer to abandonment. The world teaches us that love is responsive, that if someone loves you, they answer when you call. And so we apply that logic upward. If God loves me, He answers quickly. If He is silent, something must be wrong, either with Him or with me. Scripture reminds us in Isaiah 55:8-9, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." God spoke those words to a people in exile, to men and women who had prayed for deliverance for years and were still in Babylon. Their prayers were not bouncing off the ceiling. They were rising into a chamber so vast, so high that the answer being prepared was beyond anything they could have asked or imagined. They just could not see it yet. Listen carefully. Silence is not the same as absence. A surgeon does not talk to you while he is operating. A sculptor does not explain every chisel strike. And God, who is working at a depth you cannot yet perceive, is not obligated to narrate every move He makes. His silence in the moment is not evidence that He is not there. It is often evidence that what He is doing is too intricate to interrupt with an explanation. I once heard of a man who prayed the same prayer every single morning for 2 years. Same words, same kneeling position, same stubborn faith. Nothing moved that he could see. And then, in the span of 3 weeks, everything broke open. And when he looked back, He could trace exactly what God had been doing in every one of those silent months. The answer had been in motion the entire time. He just had not been tall enough to see it. Your prayer is not hitting the ceiling. It is going somewhere you cannot follow yet. And the day will come when you look back at this silence and understand that it was not rejection. It was sovereignty. His silence is not his absence. It is his sovereignty. 4. You are being led through a season of hiddenness. We live in an age of visibility. Post it, share it, document it. Let people see your progress, your process, your transformation in real time. And there is nothing inherently wrong with that. But there is a category of season that social media was never designed to hold the season, where God is working on you in a room with the door closed. No audience, no metrics, no evidence anyone can point to. Just you and him, and a silence that feels suspiciously like nothing is happening. But notice carefully what Psalm 91:1 says. He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will abide in the shadow of the Almighty. That word, shadow. In the original Hebrew, the word is tzel, and in the culture of the ancient Near East, where the sun could be lethal, shadow was not something dark and foreboding. Shadow was survival. Shadow was the shade of something larger than you, thrown over you, deliberately keeping the heat from destroying what was still being formed. To live in the shadow of the Almighty was not to be forgotten. It was to be covered, protected, hidden from what would harm you before you were ready to face it. Hear me on this. The hiddenness you are experiencing right now is not God's indifference. It is God's intention. There are things He is building in you that cannot be built under observation, character that only forms in private, depth that only develops in the dark, roots that only grow when no one is watching the ground. Think of a young man who spent 3 years feeling invisible. No promotion, no platform, no recognition from the people whose opinion he wanted most. He prayed for doors to open. They didn't. He prayed for his work to be seen. It wasn't. And in those 3 years, something happened in him that could not have happened on a stage. A humility, a groundedness, a dependency on God that he would never have developed if the spotlight had found him sooner. When the doors finally opened, he was ready in a way he hadn't been before. The hiddenness had not been wasted. It had been the work. If you feel invisible right now, if you feel like you are doing everything right and no one is noticing, that is not a sign that God has forgotten you. It is a sign that He is covering you. The shadow is His hand. If He has hidden you, He is preparing you. And what He prepares, He uses. If you have stayed with me this far, it is not by accident. I want you to know that God is speaking directly to your season right now, to the hidden place you are in, to the question you have been carrying. If this message is reaching something in you, please subscribe to this channel so you don't miss what comes next. And in the comments below, write this phrase: I am hidden in God's hands, and I trust His timing. Write it as a declaration. Write it as an act of faith over your own life. 5. You sense God asking you to let go of something you love. This is the sign that stops people in their tracks, because the others, the stripping, the loneliness, the silence, the hiddenness, those are things that happen to you. But this one requires something from you. This one asks you to open your hand and release what you are holding most tightly. And that is a different kind of hard entirely. Everything around us says, hold on, fight for what you love, protect what you have built, never let go of your dream. And again, there is a version of that counsel that is true and right and worth heeding. Perseverance is biblical. Faithfulness is biblical. But there is another movement entirely that the Spirit sometimes makes a quiet but unmistakable pull towards surrender. Not surrender to defeat, surrender to God. Pay close attention to what God asked to Abraham in Genesis 22. 2. Take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I shall tell you." Read those words slowly. Your only son, whom you love. God was not unaware of what he was asking. He named the love. He acknowledged the cost. And he asked anyway. Not because he wanted to take Isaac, he never intended to, but because he needed to know, and Abraham needed to know, what sat on the throne of Abraham's heart. Brother, sister, this one is difficult, but I need to say it plainly. Sometimes what God is asking you to release is not a bad thing. It is a good thing, a beautiful thing, a thing you prayed for, worked for, waited years to receive. A relationship that felt like an answer. A career that felt like a calling. A plan for your future that felt like it had God's fingerprints all over it. And now something in your spirit is sensing, this is the altar. This is the moment. The question God is asking in those moments is never really about the thing itself. It is about whether the thing has become bigger than Him. Whether your grip on it has tightened to the point where you would hold it even if He asked you to let go. There is a particular freedom on the other side of that surrender that cannot be explained to someone who has never walked through it. Abraham descended that mountain, a different man than the one who climbed it. Not because he had lost his son, because he hadn't, but because he had proven to himself and to God that his open hand was more powerful than his clenched fist. Whatever God is asking you to place on the altar right now, He sees it. He knows what it cost you. And He is not asking because He is cruel. He is asking because He is preparing you for something that requires both hands free. The open hand receives more than the clenched fist ever could. 6. You feel a deep, unexplained restlessness in your spirit. This sign is for a specific kind of person, and you will know immediately whether it is you. Everything around you is fine. Objectively, measurably fine. The bills are paid, the relationships are stable, nothing is in crisis, and yet there is something inside you that will not settle. A low hum of dissatisfaction that has no obvious source, a sense that you are living slightly to the left of where you are supposed to be, that the life you are living, good as it is not quite the life you were made for, and so you do what the world recommends. You try to quiet it. You fill the schedule tighter. You scroll longer. You keep yourself busy enough that the hum becomes background noise, because in a world that has medicalized restlessness, turned it into a symptom to be treated, the last thing anyone tells you is that the feeling might actually be God. The Apostle Paul did not mince words in Philippians 1:6. And I am sure of this, that He who began a good work in you will bring it to completion at the day of Jesus Christ. He who began a good work. Present tense in its origin, future tense in its completion. Which means right now in the middle, there is a work in progress, incomplete, unfinished, still being formed. And an unfinished work does not rest. It pushes, it presses toward what it is becoming. That restlessness you are feeling is not a malfunction. It is the pressure of something in you that has not yet arrived at where it is going. Pay close attention to what I am about to say. The prophet Jeremiah recorded God's words to a people sitting in exile amid circumstances that looked nothing like the life they were promised. And God said in Jeremiah 29:11, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope." He did not say those words after the exile ended. He said them during it. In the unsettled middle, to people who had every reason to feel exactly what you are feeling right now. Picture a woman who had spent a decade building a career others envied. Good salary, respected title, a life that looked complete from the outside. But every Sunday evening, a quiet dread would settle in, not because anything was wrong, but because something was missing. She called it anxiety. Her doctor called it burnout. But what it actually was a calling that had been waiting patiently for her to stop running from it. The restlessness was not her enemy. It was her compass. Do not medicate what God is using to move you. Do not silence what the Spirit is using to steer you. That ache in your chest, that sense that more is possible, that feeling that you have not yet arrived. It is not a sign that something is broken. It is a sign that something is being built. What you call restlessness, God calls a compass. 7. Doors keep closing, but one narrow path remains open. You have applied, you have tried, you have knocked on door after door. Some of them doors you were qualified for, doors that made sense on paper, doors that people around you agreed looked right for you, and they closed. Not all at once, but steadily one after another, until the landscape in front of you has narrowed to something that feels uncomfortably small. One path, one option, one direction that remains open while everything else has shut. And the temptation when you are standing in that narrowed corridor is to assume you have failed, that the closed doors are a verdict, a divine no spoken over your life. That if God were truly leading you, the options would be expanding, not contracting. Look at what God said to the church in Revelation 3:8. I know your works. Behold, I have set before you an open door, which no one is able to shut. I know that you have but little power, and yet you have kept my word and have not denied my name. This was written to the church of Philadelphia. Not the largest church, not the most powerful church, not the church with the most resources or the most influence. A small church. A tired church. A church that, by every external measure, did not look like it was winning. And yet God said to them, I have set before you an open door, not many doors. One door, and no one can shut it. Here is the truth. God does not lead through abundance of options. He leads through clarity of direction. And sometimes that clarity only becomes visible when everything else has been removed. The closed doors are not a punishment. They are a process of elimination, the kind only God can perform, because only He knows which room you are supposed to be in. There is a man who spent 2 years applying for positions in his field. Rejection after rejection, doors that opened a crack and then closed, opportunities that evaporated. And in his frustration, he almost missed the one door that stayed open, a smaller opportunity, a less prestigious path, one that his ego had been quietly dismissing. But that was the door, and through it, he stepped into everything he had been asking God for, just not in the package he had expected. Do not spend your energy forcing open what God has closed. Do not mistake His closed doors for His rejection. Stand at the one door that remains. Knock. Step through. Because the door that no one can shut is the only one worth walking through. God does not close every door to punish you. He closes them to protect your direction. 8. You have a peace that makes no sense given your circumstances. We have arrived at the final sign, and I have saved this one for last deliberately, because this is the one that, if you have it, overrides every argument the enemy has been making against you. This is the sign that cannot be manufactured, cannot be performed, cannot be borrowed from someone else's faith or conjured through positive thinking. Either it is there or it is not. And if it is there, if in the middle of everything falling apart, there is something in you that is inexplicably still, then pay attention. Because that stillness is not coming from you. The world says peace is the product of resolved circumstances. Fix the problem and you will feel better. Settle the uncertainty and the anxiety will lift. Get the answer and the quiet will return. And by that logic, in the kind of season we have been describing, the stripping, the silence, the closed doors, the hiddenness, peace should be the last thing you feel. Here is what the Apostle Paul wrote from a prison cell in Philippians 4:7. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Surpasses all understanding. Paul did not say the peace of God that comes when you understand what is happening. He said the peace that surpasses understanding. Peace that exists independently of explanation, independently of resolution, independently of circumstances making sense. A peace you cannot account for. A peace that has no logical source in your current situation. A peace that, if you tried to explain it to someone on the outside, would sound irrational. And then notice the verb, will guard. In the original Greek, that word is phroreise, a military term. It describes a soldier posted at a gate, standing watch, not allowing what should not enter to enter. The peace of God is not a passive feeling that drifts through you on good days. It is an active force, a stationed guard. It stands at the entrance of your heart and your mind, and it turns away the fear, the despair, the confusion, the voice that says you are finished. Engrave this in your spirit. If you are in the hardest season of your life, if by every external measure things are falling apart, and yet there is something deep in you that refuses to fully collapse, something that keeps getting up in the morning, something that still believes even when the believing feels thin. That is not your strength. That is his peace doing exactly what Paul described, standing guard. Think of a woman sitting in a hospital waiting room. Diagnosis unclear, future uncertain. Everything she had planned quietly unraveling in a sterile room with bad lighting. And someone asked her later, "How were you so calm?" And she said, "I wasn't calm. I was terrified." But underneath the terror, there was something that would not move, something that kept whispering, "I am here. I have not left. I know the way through this." That is the peace that surpasses understanding, not the absence of fear, the presence of God underneath the fear. If you have that "if" in the wreckage of this season, there is a thread of inexplicable stillness that you keep returning to. Do not dismiss it as denial. Do not pathologize it as numbness. Recognize it for what it is. It is the clearest sign of all 8 that you are not alone in this, that he is with you, that the path you are on, however broken it looks, is the one he is walking with you. When his peace guards you, it is proof that he is with you. And if he is with you, you are exactly where he wants you. 8 signs. We have walked through all of them. The stripping of everything familiar, the falling away of people you loved, the prayers that felt like they went nowhere, the season of hiddenness where no one could see what God was doing, the call to open your hand and release what you were holding most tightly, the restlessness that would not quiet, no matter how busy you kept yourself, the doors closing one by one until only one narrow path remained, and finally, the peace, the inexplicable, unreasonable, sovereign peace that stood guard even when everything else was shaking. 8 signs, 1 truth. Falling apart in God's hands is not the end. It is the beginning. I want to speak directly to you now, not to an audience, not to a general category of believer, but to you, the person who made it to the end of this message. You did not find this video by accident. You were not browsing and stumbled here. Something in you needed to hear this today. And I believe God, who is precise in how he speaks, made sure it reached you. Whatever you are carrying right now, whatever has been falling apart, whatever has felt like silence or abandonment or misdirection, I want you to hear this as clearly as I can say it. You are not outside of his will. You are not being punished. You are not forgotten. The very signs you have been reading as evidence that something is wrong may be the clearest evidence that something is deeply, intentionally right. Joseph spent years in a pit and a prison before he stood in a palace. David spent years running in the wilderness before he sat on a throne. And in every one of those years, each one of those dark and disorienting days, God was not absent. He was architecting. He was preparing. He was doing the slow, hidden, necessary work that could not be rushed and could not be skipped. Your season is not a detour. It is the road. If this message has spoken to something in your life today, I want to ask you to do 2 things. First, share this with someone who is in the thick of their own falling apart. Someone who needs to be reminded that the path is still there, even when they cannot see it. You may not know how much it will mean to them, but God does. And in the comments below, write this: God, I trust you, even when I cannot see the path. Write it as a prayer. Speak it as a declaration over your own life and over the season you are in right now. Subscribe to this channel so we can keep walking together through what the Bible actually says about the life God calls us to. There is more to come. And wherever you are, whatever is falling apart, you are not alone in it.